Hi YouTube, Darth here. Today's weapon review is of the AUG A3, an assault rifle usable by the Assault class in Battlefield 4. The AUG has gone through some changes in both real life and Battlefield 4 since it was introduced, but before I get any further, let's cut to the chase. So, should you use the AUG A3? Yes or no? Yes, it has some deficiencies, but for the most part, this bullpup is a stable weapon that is pretty handy in a ton of situations. Let's look at the good aspects of the AUG A3. This weapon has the fastest bullet velocity of any automatic weapon in the game. At 670 meters per second, it is so fast that only the JNG-90 bolt-action rifle and QBU-88 dedicated marksman rifle are matches. This means that when you shoot a bullet at your target with the AUG A3, it's going to get there, meaning very little need to lead your targets unless they are exceptionally far away. As a bullpup weapon, the AUG A3 has a great hipfire advantage over other similar assault rifles. The spread of bullets is roughly 20% less while hip-firing than its counterparts. This advantage is particularly necessary when using this weapon in a close quarters capacity because of its rate of fire, which is more appropriate to mid-range. The AUG A3 is exceptionally controllable thanks to its middling rate of fire and muted recoil pattern. This makes it nicely suited to its medium to long range game at about 30 to 80 meters. With a little recoil control on the part of the player's firing habits, it's quite good at long range. The versatility of this gun is pretty extraordinary, and depending on what attachments you use, it can be made to work in a variety of ranges and situations. Overall, the AUG A3 has some very exceptional stats and a lot of middle-of-the-road stats. Its damage rate is not terribly impressive, but not a detraction either. But there are some things about the AUG that are not that great. The AUG's primary weakness is its reload time. While it's not the worst in the game or even of the bullpup assault rifles at 2.5 seconds for a bullet in the chamber time and 3.1 seconds for empty, it's going to be a relatively long time to reload this weapon and get it back at your enemies. The aiming down sight's recoil modifier of the AUG A3 is higher than other comparable assault rifles. However, while you should definitely still maintain good ADS habits, there is a slight advantage over other rifles when moving and aiming down sights. So this is a little bad and a little good combined. Because it's not a damage powerhouse, this weapon will lose to just about every CQB weapon there is. But you shouldn't be using this weapon in exclusively close quarters situations, so this point can be negated through strategy. Other than those few negatives, the AUG A3 is a very solid weapon in certain categories with average stats in others. Of the bullpup assault rifles, it's definitely one of the best among them and the most versatile. The middling rate of fire combined with decent accuracy at range makes it a nice all-around weapon. The AUG A3 is probably one of the easiest to control assault rifles in Battlefield 4. The recoil pattern is a very modest .26 up, .235 left, and .85 right with a first shot recoil multiplier of 2.1. Combined with the high velocity and rate of fire, this puts the rifle in a pretty solid position as a mid to long range assault rifle. So let's talk about how to control it. Uncontrolled, that recoil is going to pull the weapon's fire slightly up and to the left. To counter this pattern, assuming you're on PC, simply pull down and to the right slightly. It's not a strong recoil, so it doesn't need massive correction. Furthermore, because the weapon has a low spread per shot increase of 0.091 degrees, you can squeeze off more rounds in a burst to control the balloon. You'll want to fire this weapon in bursts of about 5 to 7 rounds apiece, as this will guarantee a kill against most targets. It'll also give you the tightest spread possible with this weapon, particularly at range where all the recoil factors come together and really matter. Now, this is one of the weapons in the game that, because of its bullpup design, lets you accomplish a wide range of tactics. The extremely fast bullet velocity is a serious edge in longer range engagements, and the bullpup design of this weapon makes it no slouch in close quarters battles. While it's not great in CQB, it can certainly hold its own. That being said, I found that this weapon was really the ultimate in post up, stop, and shoot assault rifles, meaning if I advanced, found a defensive position, and used it to pick off enemies, it was the most effective means of using this rifle. This reminds me a lot of the AR-160, and while I don't think it's quite as laser accurate as that weapon, the AUG A3 is a very powerful mid to long range assault rifle for when a DMR will just not do. But don't get me wrong, this weapon is no replacement at long range for DMRs and bolt actions. The AUG A3 is just very versatile and very strong at longer range assault rifle engagements. While the weapon is most effective at holding a position and then advancing, I found that it was actually quite versatile in many situations, unlike some of the other assault rifles. While I would very much prefer to stop and shoot with this weapon at mid to long range, the on-the-move accuracy bonus of the bullpup makes this weapon surprisingly effective when strafing and shooting at closer range. With the right attachments, you can really make this weapon do pretty much anything you'd ever want, but I'll get to that in the next section. One thing you'll want to have mastered for the AUG A3 is knowing when to aim down sights and when to hip fire. Because the weapon is not that great in close quarters engagements, you'll need that extra time in CQB to come out on top. I've mentioned this before, but if the target is closer than about 10 to 15 meters, you should definitely be going for hip fire kills instead of ADS kills, especially on a bullpup weapon like the AUG A3 that gets added bonuses for hip fire. Finally, keep in mind that the reload time on this weapon is particularly dangerous, especially if you're a compulsive reloader like me. While it's not atrocious, at 2.5 seconds the reload time of the AUG A3 means you may need to consider when to reload. Specifically, I found myself in trouble when trying to advance while reloading or reloading too frequently because I always felt like I was not going to win in situations where 2 or more enemies are in close proximity. At the very least, I recommend you bring some serious close-range firepower as your secondary, and I found myself running with the Deagle and 93R most of the time. Because the AUG A3 is excellent at ranged engagements, you can leave the magnums at home. I've said already that the AUG A3 is a very versatile weapon, and its attachments make it even more so. You can very nearly turn this weapon into anything you want, and I have one loadout that worked best for me. But first, I did some research and took a look at what the top Battlefield players were using on BF4stats.com. I found that the red dot sights were easily the most popular sights. Most players ran with no accessory, the heavy barrel and flash hider tended to be near even in popularity, and the potato and stubby grips were the most popular grips. My setup is similar, and I did end up running a number of other loadouts for evaluation purposes. For my optic, I ran with a 1x hollow sight. This is a bit of personal preference on this weapon, but I felt like this sight worked best for the mid to long range engagements of this weapon. You might be able to get away with a 3-4x or even 4x scope, but I think the versatile nature of the AUG A3 makes those sights weight the weapon just a bit too much toward the long range and severely guts the close to mid range capability. The hollow gave just the right amount of reach and close range capability, especially when combined with my accessory. My accessory of choice should be a no-brainer at this point. It's the laser sight. You really just can't go wrong with a bullpup that's great at hip fire when paired with a laser. It gives the AUG A3 just a little bit more edge in close range fights. I did try out a magnifier here as well, but I just don't feel like it gives enough benefit to not use the laser. If you can't remember to turn your laser off when you're not in close quarters, running with no attachment is a reasonable option if a bit wasteful. For the barrel, I ended up going with the heavy barrel. The low upwards recoil modified to modestly increased upwards recoil is easily countered by more downwards pull. The tighter spread that you gain when aiming down sights is totally worth it with the AUG A3, especially considering that it works best at mid to long range. The heavy barrel is a pretty natural pairing with the AUG because of the 700 RPM and its fast bullet velocity. It turns the weapon into a laser rifle, especially when paired with an appropriate grip. Because the weapon has a relatively low first shot recoil multiplier and a low spread per shot increase, my underbarrel attachment of choice was the stubby grip. The bonus to accuracy with prolonged fire pairs well with the ranges that this weapon operates. At maximum range, it's going to take 6 to 7 bullets to down your opponent, and the spread can increase somewhat substantially over range. The stubby grip helps temper that and gives you a nice advantage during prolonged firefights. It also is a nice pairing with a weapon that is already running the heavy barrel because you'll want to get the most advantage out of that tightened spread. Now, this isn't the only setup I ran with, and the AUG A3 is a very versatile weapon. I also ended up using 2 other combinations that I found to be relatively useful in the right situations. For maps where I thought I would have more close quarters encounters, I would run with a vertical grip and a suppressor. This drastically decreases the weapon's ability at long range, but amps up its on-the-move killing power. Slightly less impressive was the flash hider and angled grip combination. It helped to make the weapon particularly deadly at mid-range, but just didn't work quite as well as my other combinations. I found myself trying to use this setup like the M416 to no good effect. The AUG A3 is not quite good enough at close range run and gun to outshoot the weapons that are best in ranges closer than 25 meters. So choose your setup appropriately depending on your playstyle, but I recommend picking up attachments that help the gun where it works best, at the medium to long range engagements. The AUG A3 is a versatile weapon that's particularly good at medium to long range, and it can hold its own in close-up battles. If you want a weapon to nicely complement this range in your playstyle, the AUG A3 is a definite winner and a definite yes. It's not alone out there, as I found that the AR-160 is also a great long-range assault rifle, and it may actually be better in a number of situations. If you want something that works better at mid-range and definitely a lot better at close range, I'd recommend picking up the M416. And if you find yourself missing the bullpup weapons, the L85A2 is also a serious contender. That's it for this episode of Yes or No. If you found this video helpful or insightful, please leave it a like. If there's something you think I missed, or if you have a different weapon you prefer in long-range situations, please leave a comment below. Be sure to leave a comment here if you have a weapon you'd like to see in a future episode of Yes or No. If you're new around here, check out my channel and please consider subscribing. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time, YouTube.